So as we await any decision on the ruling by Peter C. Harvey, something Jay's brought up the last couple of days that we haven't dug into is the role of Deshaun Watson's contract in this whole saga and back and forth with the NFL. And Jay, I'll let you start with this because you kind of inspired this topic of conversation. But how much of a role do you think the Browns fully guaranteeing his $230 million contract is playing as the NFL goes back and forth appealing this and then seeking out an indefinite suspension that seems to be the maximum punishment they could be going for?
I can't believe that I'm saying this, but I used to be the guy who believed in zero conspiracy theories. I always thought they were so far-fetched, most of them. But all of a sudden, when it comes to this, I just feel like I'm loaded with conspiracy theories. I think that it has a great deal to do with everything that's happened so far. I think when he walked from the Sue L. Robinson decision with $0 in fine, and obviously he was going to lose $350,000 as that's, the 6 games of his first year salary. I think the league is furious about that, and I've maintained all along that they were furious about that because I know that Andrew Berry has stated publicly that, that's the way a lot of contracts are done. I just don't buy that. I think that this contract was structured this way specifically to avoid financial punitive impact on Deshaun Watson. And I think that's irritated Roger Goodell. And for the life of me, and Jason, I would love to get your thoughts on this. Why did Sue L. Robinson not institute a fine? She said that she basically went to the limit of the guidelines that the NFL had provided her with. But it seems to me that she could have ended all of this by saying, you know what? I prorated how much he's going to make over his 5 years as a Cleveland Brown. And whatever that number would have been, it would have been far bigger than $333,000. So instead of fining him 6 game checks for year 1, I'm going to fine him 6 game checks if he were to make the exact amount for every game over the 5 years. That would have been, I believe, over $10 million. That might have quelled some of the people that were looking at her decision saying, wait, what? This can't be all he's getting. You said in your decision, guilty on all 3 counts. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And you're giving him 6 games and no fine. What's your take on that? And why wouldn't she have hit him with a fine?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a great question. I did expect some sort of fine to come with her decision. I'd love to sit down with her over a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and find out why there was no fine instituted. I think the contract angered owners for different reasons. And 2 things can be true. It can be sleazy and it can be smart, right? It was smart the way that they did it because the cap situation is real. And the money that they can roll over from this year to next year is real.
Sure.
And so it's smart business. It's good business. It's also sleazy. You're right. It's also kind of gross. And a lot of people will tell you new contracts typically are not structured this way. Yes, NFL contracts have a low base and a high signing bonus, but a lot of times it's a guy that you already have. It's a restructure. It's some when you're bringing in a new player on your team, rarely is it structured this way. Okay, fine. It's still good business and it's still really dirty. It's still kind of gross and sleazy. Both things can be true. I think what the structure of it and the fact that it's fully guaranteed, I think it did aggravate a lot of owners across the league. I heard that when we were at the owners' meetings. Already, like the Bisciotti in Baltimore, Arthur Blank in Atlanta, those guys were already very public and on the record saying they didn't like it. But I don't think it's going to have this long-term impact on other quarterback negotiations that other people seem to think it is. Kyler Murray didn't get a fully guaranteed $230.5 million contract. I think his guarantees were $160. No. It looked more like the traditional type of contract, and Kyler Murray is really not even that good, frankly. He's not even in that class that we're talking about. So I'll be interested to see what Lamar Jackson gets. What does Justin Herbert get? What does Joe Burrow get?
Right.
I think that people are going to look, frankly, at the Haslams as that's the crazy uncle over there, and they just do what they do. And that doesn't, and even Bisciotti even said at the owners' meetings, that doesn't mean we have to follow it. Just because they did it doesn't mean it has to become the standard. So I do think it's upset a lot of people. I think you're right that the way that they structured it probably did aggravate some people. And if the league does come back, if Peter Harvey comes back and fines him $8 million, $10 million, that probably will help soothe a little bit, but guess what? He still has $230 million coming. If you want to take $8 or $10 million off the top, okay, he's still not going to starve. And that's why.
But it's better than a third of a million. The optics of it are better than a third of a million.
I agree. I agree with that.
I'm on your side.
Let me ask you guys this. And again, this is the next layer of my conspiracy theory, but as we've watched this whole thing play out, I've said a number of times, to me, it feels like these guys are actors that are playing roles that are already predetermined. Is it possible, Jay, that Roger Goodell and Sue L. Robinson, and I know that she is this woman of integrity and she's a former judge, but it isn't outside the realm of reasonability that they could have all sat down and said, this is how this is going to play out. Sue, hit him with whatever number of games you think. We're going to appeal. Don't hit him with a fine. We're going to appeal, and we're going to throw the financial component. That way they can say to everybody who's been screaming, this is not justice, they can then say, hey, we came down with the hammer on this guy. $10 million is not a small number. We're bound by the 6 games because that's what the guidelines are. But we're going to hit him with $10 million, and we look like the good guy. Sue L. Robinson comes out as a winner. I think Deshaun, to Albert Breer's point yesterday, hell, if it's 10 or 12, he may walk from this and say, I'm done. No suit. I'm happy with that. Let's just get on with the season. So maybe that's what happens. They come down and hit him with a big stiff fine. It stays at 6 games, and I think that's probably the closest thing to a win-win-win for everybody.
I don't think Sue would go. I disagree with that. I don't think Sue would go along with that, number one. I don't think that she's going to be part of
it is a bridge too far, I think.
Some grand plan. And number two, the NFL wants this to go away too. Everybody wants to move on from this. Nobody wants this to drag out as long as it has and as long as it has. And I disagree with Albert. I think Deshaun does sue regardless of how long it is. Because if he would accept 10 or 12 games, then just settle at that number. That's what's been out there in terms of a settlement. If both sides can agree to that, then you don't even need Peter Harvey. You just come to an agreement. You come to a settlement of 10 games, 11 games, 12 games, whatever it is in there. And again, remember what I just said, 6 games counts as a full year on a contract. That's really important to Deshaun, to the Browns, to all of this. So there's a huge difference in this case between 11 games and 12 games. But
but Roger came out this week though, Jason, and said, I want a year.
Right. But that's why I'm saying, if you're worried about, if you think that Deshaun will accept 10 or 12 games and he won't take that to court, I disagree with that, because if he was going to accept 10 or 12 games, then he would just settle that. That he would just settle at that number, and then the NFL could live with that. The fact that he won't settle at that number tells me he will take it to court if it's 10 games or 11 games or 12 games.
There's also a public perception factor here, and the NFL is all about optics. More than facts and anything else, they're about optics, and they've looked terrible, frankly, since the Sue L. Robinson decision came out. Them appealing after the NFLPA came out and said, we're not going to appeal. To have that whole process go through and then say, LLJK, we're going to do our own thing. They looked bad. They looked bad. I think it came across poorly that Roger Goodell used the words egregious and predatory behavior in his press conference.
Not ideal.
Day. Yeah, they've come across so poorly in this that I can't see a way, back to Jay's conspiracy theory, that this has all been in play beforehand. Although, Jay, you do put some interesting pieces of the puzzle together. There's one piece missing. I'm not sure what that piece is, but there's one piece missing connecting where we started in this process and where we're ending, because it shouldn't end in a situation where Roger Goodell can appoint his friend to make the final verdict. His friend's going to predictably do whatever Goodell actually wants, and that's how this whole 24-month process is going to end.
First of all, I love that Jay spent like 2 weeks in COVID protocol and just went complete conspiracy theory like a lot of people who are trapped at home during. He's going to start coming and wearing QAnon shirts and stuff. It's going to be a disaster. I think that the mistake...
Guys, I've had nothing but time on my hands. Get me out of here.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the problems with conspiracy theories is that we're always expecting them to be so blatantly laid out there. You expect them all to have been in a smoke-filled room, and there's like, and now here's how it's going to go. Here's the secret PowerPoint presentation. And then, Sue, you're going to say this. I think conspiracies more often happen a bit more organically and quietly. I think there were probably certain expectations that were just assumed. I think that maybe there was some, I just don't think you're ever going to find an email chain directly saying, and then we'll pretend to do this, and then we'll do this games, and then we'll add this many games. I think it is a fluid situation, but I also think that Sue knew that she was a hired contractor by the NFL who was expected to make a judgment based within certain parameters, based on precedent, and based on whatever sort of direction she was given by her employer, the NFL. So we can't be surprised when she came back and said, these are my findings, and this is exactly what I can say based on the parameters that you gave me. And I also think it's the NFL's prerogative. It was right there in their contract. Nobody pretend, everybody acting outraged. Like, can you believe that the NFL acted in what they consider to be their best interest within the letter of the law and the union contract that the NFL players signed? It's outrageous. It's really not. It's extremely predictable. Has nobody been watching the NFL at any point? Did you really think they were going to back down and be like, you guys got us? It doesn't happen. So this idea that somehow it's the shock that is annoying to me. Everybody just be like, can you believe that the NFL did this and followed up? It's like, yes, of course. That's what they do.
Yeah, I don't know if no one should be surprised. As you said,
Right.
It was in the cards before this even started. We knew before they picked Sue L. Robinson to be the neutral arbitrator that no matter what she said, Roger Goodell could appeal that process and appoint himself to
Right.
give the punishment. So surprise is not the right word. It's more of the optics of it. This was a neutrally agreed upon person who now all of a sudden went through this whole process, spent 2 weeks, 3 weeks coming up with a decision to then have it just be thrown out the window.
I've seen a lot of players online and stuff, NFL players, not just Browns, but everybody. This is the other thing the NFL kind of has to watch with this, I feel like, who are complaining about this process. And most of whom you can tell, frankly, probably weren't aware. They didn't read everything in the union bylaws that they signed off on and that people agreed to, the people in charge of their union. And I see a lot of them being really angry right now at the NFL and talking about, that's the one thing the NFL, they do care about PR. They don't, even though they can do it, and they want to do it, and they do it, they don't want to look like these 1% villains who are, that's just not good PR for them, and they care about PR. But they only care about it enough to try and not have that reputation. They don't care about it legitimately, and they're not like, well, we should really be fair. They're saying we should give the appearance enough to be fair that everyone stops yelling at us and and it doesn't cause more problems. That's what it feels like right now to me.
And Tyvus was on the show earlier this week talking about signing the collective bargaining agreement that's now in place, and he said, yeah, I didn't read the whole thing. I just listened to what the older guys in the locker room said and signed what they wanted to do.
Who reads their Verizon wireless plan before they click that box?
So there is shock and awe from that perspective. But
I'm still paying for the show, for that TV movie shows, or the movie station Stars. I accidentally signed up for it at one point, like 8 months ago. I'm into that thing for like $700 now or something. I've never watched it. It's a bunch of terrible movies. Anyway, so what I'm saying is, yeah, you don't read the fine print all the time, and you just expect that somebody's operating in your best interests, and that's what. And so there's some anger too, I think, at the NFL union reps from other NFL players. They're like, we got walked on. You guys just accepted this, and I just don't think they expected it to come up like this and in such an egregious way.
This is such a small piece of the CBA.
Yes.
It comes up once every handful of years. It's only 2-3 players out of, I don't know, 50 times 30 in the league.
Yes.
It's a huge. So it's just something that, okay, whatever.
And they never could have seen it being the first time that it was being tested, really, it being this nightmarish and complicated
exactly
and
right.
unprecedented of a scenario when they agreed to it. They thought it might be a drug test thing, or they thought it might be something kind of simple they've dealt with before. And they were like, yeah, and then we'll do that. We'll send it there. It looks good. They just didn't expect it to be this big cluster F that it ended up turning into. And this was just the worst case scenario for it to be the first attempt to try and use this new system. And it's failing miserably.
Well, it happened to be to a marquee player. Jason, what do you think would have happened if this same storyline was around an undrafted free agent who was a guy in camp? How long would have it taken any team in the league to immediately release that player? The story is never heard about again.
That's exactly right. The guy gets cut, he's off, and he's working construction by now.
Remember that third stringer Brown who got busted for insider trading or whatever?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody was just like, we got fight for him, bring him back. We just never heard from him again.
It always has to do with the talent of the player, the status of the player every single time. And to Mike's point, I don't think anybody saw it being such a high-profile case, such a high-profile star being sort of the litmus test case of trying to figure this out as they go.
Jay, do you think it leads to change? Do you think that the next collective bargaining agreement, there's no language that says, hey, in any disagreement, I get to break all ties? That can't be in the next CBA.
Well, I was talking about that with Tyvis the other day, and I said, like, this collectively bargained. So if the players union wants to push back on this, everything's a negotiation. They're going to have to give something up. What does the league want the players to give up? And he went right to the pensions and said the league wants to take the pensions of the retirees. So this becomes
that's so gross, so villainous.
So this becomes a really complicated issue of, okay, if you don't want Roger, and who knows if that's true or not, but like he was right instant. He said, listen, the pensions are a really big deal to the league. So this becomes a lot more complex. This becomes like a political issue of, hey, this bill we have here, but you slide in this really dirty component that has nothing to do with the bill to try and get it passed, or why you vote things yay or nay. This is sort of the same thing. If the league wants this, or if the players union wants this changed, they're going to have to give something up, and they're going to have to give something up of significance, because it's in there now.
We want to stop paying on Dan Fike's pension from like one of those players from the 1980s that made like $80,000 a year and had to work like summer jobs. They want to take away his pension. He's in a wheelchair from being on the line for that long.
Yeah.
And now they're just like, sorry, Grandpa, we had a new negotiation, and now we're taking away your Social Security. Sorry, guys.
To answer your question, Mike.
Well, it would be to future players, right, Jay? I mean, this wouldn't affect any of the grandfathered players that are already in on a deal. They're not going to take existing pensions away.
I
think
know.
what they're trying to fight for.
They do it in regular everyday life. They screw with the retirees, and they mess with their money.
I just
and their
can't
insurance.
imagine they would ever get away with that. I can't imagine they would ever.
It's up to the union.
Would they like to? Sure.
It's up to the union if the union will protect the retirees or not.
Well, the current CBA runs till 2030, so we have 7 more years of Roger Goodell as the supreme.
And I'll be interested to see if there's another case. That's a long time. Is there another 1 or 2 cases that fall into the personal conduct policy that have to go through this process again, and how does it play out? It'll be interesting to see.
I don't mean to take us off topic, but I've noticed this the last couple of times in here. Jay, is that my Yeti mug you're drinking out? Did I leave that at your house and you've been using it? Because that's like one of my favorite cups. Is that yours? Oh, it's yours. Although you could have had that put on.
Conspiracy theory. He ran out and had his name put on.
Because I have that same mug. You've been drinking out for 2 days. I'm like, is that my mug? Did I leave that at its place? Because I missed that.
This was a gift for a wedding that I was in, so I can assure you that this is mine.
I love that cup, though.
And even if it was yours, you would never want to drink out of this ever again. Because I've been drinking out of this for the last 10 days.
Yeah, you got.
So by now, I'm sure the COVID particles have actually become part of this.
There's
cup.
2 new strains in that thing, at least, no doubt. Yeah, that's all right. It's a good cup, anyways. Great cup, Jay. I like it.
Well, we have